Welcome to the Successful Encore Career, a podcast of employment for seniors. This episode is brought to you by Nationwide Insurance, Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, and Innosource. I'm Brett Johnson, longtime volunteer and supporter of Employment for Seniors. And as always, with me is Carol Ventresca, Executive Director of Employment for Seniors. Hey, Carol.
Hey, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing great today.
Good. And we have a very special guest who is rejoining us for another podcast. We thank him very much for coming in. Ken Lazar, who is the founder and principal of the Ability Professional Network. Ken, thank you so much for coming to see us today.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
Appreciate for being here.
For those listeners who heard Ken's earlier podcast with us, we talked about the work we've done together.
Yes.
Ken was very critically needed in our community during the recession and helped us by creating the Scioto Ridge Job Networking Group.
Right.
And where the Tuesday Tune-Up Group is back underway. These are resources that we have in Central Ohio. In your community, just check out, do a Google search and do networking groups and employment assistance in your neighborhood, because there are groups out there to help you if you are in your job search. So, Ken, we've got a fun topic to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think we have a lot of anecdotal, wonderful stories to give to folks about what you call exit speeches.
Correct.
So let's talk about what is an exit speech and why is it so important?
Well, an exit speech is what you say when an interviewer asks you, why did you leave your last job? Or
Right.
Why are you leaving your current job? And it happens in an interview, and it is one of the most critical parts of the interview, because if you don't construct a good exit statement, you could physically end the interview right there.
Right. And people are afraid of trying to develop that answer. They don't want to admit why they may be leaving for a lot of reasons, but and that's where the importance comes. Is that
right? Well, leaving your employer is eventual. I mean, everybody leaves their employer at some point in time. I don't know of a lot of people like in the past that have been with one employer for their entire lives. So when you leave an employer, you really need to know why, and either it's of your own volition or the employer releases you for some reason. But when you're looking for another job, you're going to have to come up with a statement as to why. And there's some guidelines about what you should include in the statement, what you shouldn't include in the statement, just to put you in the best light of why you left your last employer.
and to be specific, someone could be leaving because they are currently employed and maybe not happy or looking for more salary, or there are varied reasons to leave a current employer, but they also could have been laid off. They could have been fired, terminated for
Yes.
whatever. The employer could have left town, employer closed down. They don't exist anymore. During the recession, how many companies did, I mean, it was just like they were just like whoosh, right off the face of the earth. So there are a lot of reasons, and it's better to be truthful and upfront and have your story, because if you don't have a good response to this question, the employer can make an assumption that's way out there and more detrimental to your application.
Exactly, because one of the primary purposes of an interview is to build trust between you and the company. So if your exit statement doesn't build on that trust, or the exit statement, exit speech doesn't quite ring right, then you're not building the trust in the interview process.
So it sounds like that should be well rehearsed and confident in what you say.
Well, I ask people to write it down. Just write it down and put it aside, and then come back and reduce it by 10%. Put it aside.
Oh,
then come back and reduce it by 10% and put it aside, because it should be pretty concise. It should be positive, and we can go through some things that really should be in the statement. But people tend to just drone on, which is not necessary. You can do it in a very succinct manner.
One of my favorite recruiters always told me to tell my students at Ohio State, don't answer a question that wasn't asked. So very much like this, you have to answer the question, but give just the amount of information that's necessary.
And actually, it is the most asked interview question. So most people think,
Sure.
Tell me about yourself is the most asked interview question. It is not. Because an employer could ask you this question multiple times. Why did you leave this job? Why did you leave this job? Why did you leave this job? They could go back through your resume and ask you why you had left these particular jobs. So not only do you need to know why you left your last job, you should have information on why you left your previous jobs.
Good point. So tell us a little bit about what employers are wanting to hear. What are the, what can we say, major points that need to be mentioned?
Well, there are four.
Okay.
There are four major points. The first one is did you leave for a good reason, which is important. The second one is, did you leave voluntarily? The third is, did you leave on good terms? And the fourth is, what are your work values?
Interesting.
All included in your exit statement.
Okay.
So the last one about what are your work values is kind of interesting because there are some things in the exit statement also that they're not looking for you to say. So you should never, ever badmouth your employer.
Right.
You should never badmouth your boss. Those things should never come out in the exit statement. Because if they do, what do you think that the interviewer is thinking about?
What are you going to say about me?
What
Right.
will it happen here?
Right.
So you want to make sure that that's very clean in your exit statement. When I coach people on your exit statement, the first thing that you should start out with is actually giving your company some kudos that you left. It says, I really enjoyed working for XYZ company. It's a great company. I enjoyed working there. I learned a lot. I think I contributed a lot. But this is the circumstances in which I left the company. And then you go through the circumstances. But the first statement ought to be very positive and very forthcoming. So is that kind of the things that you're looking for when you're talking to when you're counseling your...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, over and above everything else is it's never negative. It's always from a positive standpoint. And I love that when you said to talk about your values, because even that positivity and all the reasons for leaving a job, it all contributes to your values. Even losing a job, being fired, there's value. There's some learning that has happened.
Exactly. So, and I'll give you an example of here. I brought several examples. So let's just go through some
Absolutely.
of
Let's
them.
do.
Yes,
Okay. Right.
absolutely.
So here's one is if you're in an interview and you're currently employed, and maybe the recruiter has reached out to you and has given you an opportunity to better your career or better your salary or something. So you're in an interview with another company and you're currently employed. And they ask you, why are you leaving your current company? So this is a statement by Pat Seeklings, who writes about this on the internet. And she says in this statement, says, I have been at my company for 3 years now, and I've learned a lot from working with some amazing salespeople. So immediately, it's very positive at the beginning. And then she says, I worked my way up to a regional sales manager 18 months ago, and my region has beat our sales projections by at least 25% each quarter since. Now, employer wants to hear that if they're hiring a salesperson.
Sure.
So already she's positive and she's successful.
Exactly.
Next is, however, I'm starting to feel like I need some new challenges. This position really appeals to me because it would allow me to manage a bigger team and sell more innovative products.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that goes to your work values. That goes to why you're changing your jobs. It goes to the fact that you are successful and that you're positive about your company.
It also shows the employer that you've done your homework and you know
gonna go
what it
there
is
too.
that
Exactly.
what they can learn from this new employer, what a candidate can learn, and doing something new or having new products and that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely, that's wonderful.
Yeah. With that example, you brought up something in my mind too, that you can, talking about your current employer or the former employer, whatever the situation might be, but you're giving these high accolades over and over and over, the transition,
Yeah.
the but,
Yeah.
without it going, but things went sour or whatever the case might be. That transition is probably the most important piece of that whole scenario, isn't it?
It really is. And the other part of that is that employers like to hear that you're moving for a career progression, not necessarily a money progression,
Right.
because money is a fleeting thing.
Right.
They want you to be there for a long period of time. So the best candidates move for a career, a better their career rather than better their finances. Because if they're successful in their career, they will be successful in their finances.
That's a really good point, Ken.
Can a career move, though, be because it's a caustic atmosphere? Can you state that?
From your previous
Right.
employer,
That you,
I wouldn't say that.
okay. Because there are those scenarios. It's just a bad scenario.
Oh my God, I've been in that scenario.
We all have.
Oh,
And how do you address that then?
it can be addressed in different ways. I would put that aside. You know,
Yeah, just don't even touch
Don't
it.
even talk about the caustic atmosphere because we don't really know what that means. It's not a very quantifiable thing.
True.
We all know what that means here, but I don't know what the employer thinks that is.
Right. Right.
And then it goes back to your point of looking for the challenges.
Right.
Just look for the challenges.
For example, I have a candidate that just interviewed recently, and he is a salesperson, but he has a mechanical engineering degree from Ohio State. Very, very successful in his current position, and I've put him into a company that is selling a longer sales cycle, capital equipment, highly engineered equipment, that type of thing. So he's coming from a company that sells technical equipment, but it's very transactional. I mean, he's selling short sales cycle. He goes in, he sells, like small stuff. So in his exit speech, he said, I'm really interested in becoming the expert on this large capital equipment so that I can guide my customers through the purchase of these products. Right now, I'm doing some transactional things. I kind of like that, but I want to become an expert. Bingo.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that was just an excellent exit speech, and why he wanted to work for the company in all in one.
You know, in that particular example too, one of the things that we talk to our Employment for Seniors clients, even if they're looking for a part-time job and maybe not a really high-level job, you know, they have to own that job search. And this really is just another step of owning your job search, knowing what you want to do, where you want to be, why you're leaving where you are. All of those are bits and pieces of owning your job search, which is going to make it not just that you're going to find the job, but the job you find and that you get is going to be something you're going to be happy with. If you do this homework, make sure that you've got all of these bits and pieces together.
It's a whole nother podcast.
It probably is.
I mean, that's yeah. And it has to be good for both you, has to be good for the employer.
Right.
If it's a good match, then yes. And you should, and even though it's a candidate market right now, you still have to structure your exit statement that makes sense for the employer. It's not all about you. I mean, you may have a job. It's not about you. It's still about them. You're selling yourself to the employer.
Right. Right. Well, let's do another example.
Yes.
Maybe somebody who's coming from a firing situation, termination.
Okay, so there's all kinds of reasons why people get fired.
Right.
All right. So and a lot of people that I've talked with don't really know why they got fired. Or don't have the real reason why they were fired. They think that they know, but they don't. But in fact, they were let go. They were fired. So it could be some kind of company policy that they broke, that they didn't even know there was a company policy. That happens. It could be a performance issue, that they didn't meet expectations on performance. It could be a variety of things. It could be harassment. It could be a whole mess of things, but you have to put it in the best light possible. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, in order to build trust with an employer, because employers can find out. I mean, if they really, really want to find out, they can find out. Mm-hmm. So I've done a lot of research, and there is no federal law that says that an employer can't tell another employer that the employee was fired. They can say that, and they can say they were fired for cause, and this is the cause. They can't say that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think that they can't. They can't.
Right.
So you got to be upfront and you got to be honest. I think honesty is the best policy. You're going to a new company. Why wouldn't you want to be honest with the company? Mm-hmm. And if they don't appreciate your honesty in the interview process, then you don't want to be with that company anymore.
Exactly.
Sure. Okay. So here's one about a person that was terminated. And this person says, after some management changes, it became clear that the new department director had new expectations for the role that didn't really mesh for my strengths. Ultimately, she decided to bring someone from her previous organization who had more sales experience. The experience taught me that my real talent is at customer service, and I know I would be a major asset in a role like this one, which focuses on improving the customer experience. Would you like me to tell you more about my experience in that area?
Oh, good mm-hmm. lead. Right.
So you're talking about values here. Mm-hmm. You were in the wrong position. You know that you were in the wrong position. So it's like any other issue. Here was the issue. Here's why I was fired. Here is what I've learned why I was fired. And here is how I've corrected the situation so it'll never happen again. Mm-hmm. Those are the way you would structure that exit speech.
Right. And it's not uncommon that jobs are changed. And we often hear from clients that not only did they get a new boss, but the boss looks like their grandchild.
Yeah.
And so that whole disconnect of age becomes an issue.
Yes.
And that's one of the things we tell clients. Don't go to your next employer and say, that was age discrimination. That, again, you have to keep that positive light. But the fact that the employer is changing their direction, it doesn't have to negatively affect you or reflect on you as long as you don't let it.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is that when you're interviewing, chances are you're going to be interviewing initially someone much younger than you.
Sure.
So don't treat them as your kid.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Especially in the interview process, because that could be condescending.
You know, one of the other points, this is a little off base a bit, but one of our volunteers is an incredible HR person, just amazing background. But one thing she always reminds us is just because you're interviewing does not mean the interviewer really has good skills as an interviewer. And so you have to adjust your interviewing to make sure you're getting your message across.
That's an interesting point. And typically, the early interviewers, the people that are in HR and the recruiters, and those typically have some pretty good interviewing skills. But when you get to the hiring manager, sometimes they're not really good, and they rely on their gut. Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
I'll know them when I see them, kind of,
yeah, I'm sure.
Of decision making. So,
and that's where I see that a tactic of would you like to hear more about?
Yes,
really comes into play of the diversion as well as
bring the conversation around.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No matter what level of interviewer it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Easily get right into the point where what you want to make about where you're going with your career.
Well, yeah,
your strengths.
And what this person says in the last sentence, would you like me to tell you more about my experience in that area?
Well,
if this person is interviewing for a customer service role, I mean, bingo.
Right.
It's perfect.
And again, you've done your homework.
Yes.
You know why you're there.
Yes.
And you've showed up.
Yes. And you showed up.
Showed up.
Absolutely.
And you're ready for it.
Yes.
That's what it says.
Love it. Yeah.
Well, I mentioned that you shouldn't talk about age discrimination in an interview, and you've given us some really good positive examples. Can you give us some negative examples that we can tell our listeners don't say this?
Carol, one comes to mind that is a classic, and it happened in front of 150 people. So I'm not saying anything out of school. So years ago, this was probably around 2009, 2010, in the height of the recession, we had a Cellular Ridge Job networking group meeting. There was probably about 150 people in the room. And Chris Senna, who was then Vice President of Human Resources, one of the Vice Presidents of Human Resources for Cardinal Health, was our guest speaker. And part of his talk was crafting your exit statement. So he stopped his presentation, and he says, I want you to take the next 7 minutes and write down your exit statement. And we stopped, and everybody's writing, and they're writing and writing. There's a silence in the room, and we're done. And he says, okay, who would like to give their exit statements? And he went to a couple of people, and they were okay. He showed them how to adjust the exit statement. And we finally come to this guy. I'll never forget him. He was the CFO of a company here in Columbus, and he stood up. And he said, the reason that I'm leaving my company is that at the end of the year, the president and I couldn't come to a decision of what the company books should look like. And there's this hush fell over the room. And then one of our career coaches, Karen Combs, gets up and points at him and says, I don't want that coming out of your mouth ever again.
Right.
And it was probably the worst exit speech that I've ever heard coming out of a C-level a person. So, So every time I see Chris, I remind him about and he laughs. We laugh about the whole thing. But
oh my gosh! And you wonder how many interviews that person went to and said that, or something like it.
Well, that's the reason that I ask everybody to write down their exit speech. I think we talked about it. Is that make sure that you write it conversationally, because when we write, we tend to write differently than we talk. But write it, make sure you understand it, put it aside, come back to it, thin it out some more, because what you really want to has a very concise, believable statement as to why you left your company.
So put as much work into it as you do into your elevator speech.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, exactly.
It's really, the elevator speech kind of gets it started, and this can kind of get it, either stop it or continue it on.
Well, you can see why each is as important
right.
To the interview as the other one.
Can we safely say, too, that it kind of reiterate what you were talking about earlier? It really needs to focus on what the employer expects and needs to hear.
Yeah.
It's not your fuming and your upset and your opportunity to get back at everybody else. It really is, you have to, all of your interviewing has to be with the idea of what does that employer need to hear.
And we may go in thinking that interviewer is going to be sympathetic or empathetic to our situation. They're not.
No.
They don't care. No. And we have to forget about that.
Right.
There's no sympathy, no empathy. They're there to do a job themselves,
yes.
Is to go through 50 people today. And you're number 49.
Well, unfortunately, yes. And they want to make sure that if you left your company, either you were downsized, or whether you were fired or what have you, that you don't bring baggage to their company.
Correct.
Exactly. They want to make sure of that.
Absolutely. To really make sure, that's part of making sure that you're going to fit in the culture of their company. So,
which is important. I will tell you that, and I'm a recruiter, and I will tell you that I've put highly qualified, highly successful sales professionals in front of my clients, and it will all boil down to, he's just not right for the culture.
Right.
Mm.
And so that's so important nowadays. I mean, it's just because I'm a recruiter, they're expecting me to give them highly qualified people. That's a given.
Mm-hmm.
The last part is we will not know until they get into the interview and talk about their exit speech or talk about what, tell me about yourself and your success, whether that person will fit well in the organization.
Right. Okay. Well, Ken, let's go over those 4 points again.
All right.
Okay. The interviewers are looking for, did you leave your company for a good reason? Did you leave voluntarily? Did you leave on good terms? And what are your work values? And the mistakes that you want to avoid are never badmouth a company, especially if you were fired. Don't say you had a disagreement with a coworker or a manager. Don't blame them. Don't make it sound like money is the only thing you care about. We talked about that, career before money. Don't sound impulsive or scattered in terms of what you want in your career. You should definitely know what you want in your career.
Right.
And don't be vague. Don't be vague. This is a trust-building statement.
Any other words of wisdom for our listeners?
The thing that I would suggest is that writing it down, number one, is the most important thing you can do. Then I would give it to somebody else. I mean, give it to your spouse, give it to your mentor, give it to your coach. Carol, give it to you and say, what do you think about this? Does this make sense to you? And then you take a look at it and say, well, it kind of makes sense, but it doesn't put you in the best light and it doesn't put your past employer in the best light. Let's craft it in this manner. That's my recommendation.
Well, congratulations. You made it through the podcast, and here's your bonus.
This is it. Ken Lazar from Ability Professional Network has been our guest for today, and he has an exciting new book called The 30-Day Roadmap to Your New Job. So we want Ken to tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll tell you what your prize will be.
Well, it's been a labor of love, Carol. My son and I have co-authored this book, and it comes through years and years of helping people find work. Like you, Carol, we've all helped people in some way, shape, or form find new employment, and we've learned there's lessons learned there. So
Absolutely.
What I wanted to do is I wanted to create a book to help people find their new employment, but I wanted to do it a little differently. Each page of the book is one day. So there are 30 consecutive days, and you can open the book and say, this is what I need to do today, this is what I need to do tomorrow, this is what I need to do the next day. So each page is 3 sections. The first section is for your mind, is what you should be doing in your job search from a mental standpoint. The second is body, because when we're in a job search, we want to keep our fit. We want to exercise, we want to do all those things that help us in the interview. And the second part of the page of the day is spirit. And it's something, it is your saying for the day. Some come from Dr. Seuss.
Yes.
Some come from all over. And it is your saying for the day. Some of them are very humorous, but you'll put it up on your mirror, and this is what you're going to think about today.
Well, I read the book over the past 4 or 5 days. Yeah. And what was good was that it was easy to read because you could pull out a page a day. And each time you're getting that information you need for the time, that period. One thing I was really glad, Brett, is that we're at Employment for Seniors, we're probably on track. Our stories to clients are the same as what Ken is presenting in this. But what I loved about it is oftentimes people come to us and say they need a job, they have bills to pay, and then throw up their hands because they don't know where to start.
Yes.
And this not only gives you a start, but a progression of steps that you're taking in a positive direction.
Yes. So this would be valuable for somebody. It would be nice if everybody had this book in anticipation of leaving their job, because it starts right from you cleaned out your desk.
Right.
You're at home. What do I do now? And takes you through the next 30 days.
Get home and nobody's home.
Nobody's home. Yeah.
And you're sitting there worried. Yes. Yes.
Put on your coat.
The loneliest feeling in the world.
Yes.
And as we just talked about in our exit speech, there are a lot of reasons why somebody would have lost a job. Lots of reasons.
Absolutely.
And you take that from a perspective of really thinking it through, doing your research, continuing on, doing something every day. One of my faculty members said, in order to finish that PhD, you got to do something every day. And that's really the same basis for this work, is that you have to work on your job search every day.
Yeah.
Correct.
You're not going to find a job. I had a client this morning who I said, have you been looking at our list of jobs? No. Well, you cannot find a job if you don't apply for them. And so there's a list that you can start with.
You got to shoot at the basket.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Nice.
Okay. So we have a special. What are we going to do for our listeners today with your new book?
Well, your reward for listening to me is to get the book for free.
Yes.
And it is an ebook. It is something that we can email to you. So for the next 30 days, 30 days.
30 days.
If you
That's
email,
the theme. Yeah.
if you email, what's the email, Carol?
They can email us here at Employment for Seniors to our special podcast email, which is podcast@employseniors.org. So that's podcast, podcast, at employseniors.org. I will send it to you, and you are going to ship out an email with the new book.
Yes. And it's an easy read. It's illustrated. It's one page a day. And I'm happy to, it's kind of my give back. I'm crossed this off of my bucket list. You can buy it on my website for $15. Sometime next year, it will go up to $1 million a copy. So
there you go.
Get it for free now.
Exactly. What a deal.
What a deal. So I just really hope it helps you in your job search.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And again, listeners, if you would like a copy of Ken's book, The 30-Day Roadmap to Your New Job, email me. I'm Carol Ventresca at Employment for Seniors, and you can email me at podcast@employseniors.org.